Thanks for tuning into the Pace Performance Podcast. So in 5 or 10 minutes, we're going to get 3 experts and a number of other staff at Brentford Football Club who work in the academy to give us a bit of an insight into how they go about things with developing their athletes. But thanks to Griff and Steve, who were on this introduction, I thought it might be a really interesting kind of introduction to the academy and the past of the academy and where they're wanting to go, and give us that introduction before we dive into that LTAD chat with the experts in 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm going to come to you first, Griff, and just ask you to give us a bit of an introduction to you, and then give us a bit of an overview of where the academy's been over the last few years and where you wanted to take it.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks for inviting us onto the call today. My name's Griff Parsons. I'm a physiotherapist by trade, as it was. But my role at Brentford is I'm head of Academy Sports Science and Medicine. And my background really is in rugby union. So I spent 12, 13 years in rugby union working for like Cardiff Blues and England Sevens. And over the years, as my time's involved, I've been in a few sort of managerial lead positions. And the opportunity came up 18 months ago to join Brentford, which was going over to the dark side, as I used to say back then. But to lead the sports science and medical strategy for the academy in their bid for their journey going from category 4 as they were when I joined, and our aim is to get to cat 1 in the next 12 months or so. So yeah, very exciting evolution, and yeah, a lot's happened in that 18 months.
Give us an insight for people that don't know the academy structure, Griff. What is cat 4? 3, 2, and therefore 1.
So there's different tiers, 4 different tiers of the academy structure. We were Cat 4 a few years ago. The decision was made by Brentford to get rid of the conventional academy structure and go towards that sort of Cat 4 status, which essentially meant that we only had a B team until last season. And since then, since my sort of entry into the building, we've now developed, we've got an under 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, 18s, 21s and a B team. So it's a busy place. I was counting the other day, this time last February, we had 10, 11 people in the sports science and medicine team, and counted up the other day the amount of people that are actually involved now under some sort of contract. We're over 40. So the growth has been huge. And you can imagine the challenges that come alongside that have just been massive. From recruiting the right type of people to making sure that first 90 days goes to plan and that everyone's got clear direction on what they're working towards. Now, we were very successful and did well last April, and we achieved the Cat 2 status. So we're the first club to go from Cat 4 to Cat 2. And as we come through to next season now, our bid is to go one step further and go towards that Cat 1 status. The sports science and medicine department is a thriving hub for some very talented people involved, from physiotherapists, athletic development coaches, data analysis people, to some incoming human performance coaches as well, which is an exciting concept as part of this human development movement that we'll be launching next month. In addition to that, there's a really ambitious and thriving research centre led by Ben Ryan, our performance director. And actually across the club, we've got 7 PhD students. And there's 2 designated PhD students for the academy. They're currently looking into things like the effect of caffeine on performance, as well as tracking things like psychological load. So it's a very, very exciting project to be a part of. I've loved the time in football. Big learning curve, obviously, moving sports for so long, but just surrounded by the right type of people and in a fantastic environment to learn and grow both personally and professionally.
And Steve's obviously one of them.
And Steve is one of those. Yeah.
Let's get him in. Steve, would you mind just giving us a bit of an intro to you firstly, and then a bit of an overview of the purpose of the academy from your perspective?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Rob. Again, just to echo Griff's words around having us on the podcast, and we know that it's a real credible platform. So for us to be speaking is very beneficial to us also today, and it's a great area for us to share our vision and our purpose. My name's Stephen Torpey. I'm the Academy Director here at Brentford. I joined the club just over a year ago, with my previous 10 years being spent in Manchester City at the academy there, and was very fortunate to work alongside some unbelievably talented staff, but also some unbelievably talented players as well, and see that journey from the days at Platt Lane and the arriving in CFA and the opening of the brand new facility, and 10 years later are able to be very proud of some of the work that went on there. I worked at Liverpool Football Club previously to that for approximately 6 years in a range of coaching positions, and over the course of a 16-year period, or 17 years now, I've either coached or worked at every age group within the academy in some form or other, and my latter sort of positions have been in more senior positions, which has been overseeing strategy and development programs and our methodology around delivering on grass from a football capacity. But that means that we have to work very closely in collaboration with all other departments, and sports science and medicine is definitely one of those that if you get that wrong and you don't work hand in hand, then the development of our talent is going to be affected by that. So it's vitally important that we work together in terms of developing the talent that we have in the building.
One thing that Griff mentioned before, and we spoke about quite a lot, and we actually did the interview with Des and the rest of the guys before doing this, but they mentioned the purpose on a page, and I was privy to a little group conversation, which was nice to be involved in because I haven't been involved in one of them for a long time. But would you mind just talking us through that purpose on a page that you've got at Brentford?
Of course. I mean, it's really important for us. When I joined the club, and when I was in the process of the discussions around being granted the opportunity to lead and the privilege to lead the academy restart and the project, and that aspiration that we have to go from category 4 to category 1, and working with the football club, what we talked about was aligning our purpose. So there's a purpose that we have and we all have in our life and the way that we like to operate, and sometimes we work in environments and that doesn't quite connect. People talk about mission statements. They have lots of ways of doing this. And when I had the conversation with the senior leaders at the club and the board, I gave forward what I felt was the right purpose for the club and for the academy project, and thankfully they aligned and they fitted really well. So our purpose is to be admired as the most caring and progressive football academy in the world. It isn't something that we'll know we've ever achieved, and we'll never quite know if we've made that, but we should be working towards that every single day and striving for that admiration, and we know that. So it's not something that we can measure in terms of our ultimate goals, but beneath that we do have some measures, and we have things that we work towards in terms of our strategy. So we work together with the senior leadership to create a academy leadership team, and that's important that we have that group. And what we did was we went away and we discussed, okay, we have this purpose and we know what that is and it's clear, but how do we bring it to life? And that's where the purpose on a page comes in. And on that purpose on a page, we have a number of different sections. We have our character, so what are the character traits of the individuals that we are really interested in joining us here at Brentford. And we talked about being a force, which is an important part of that character trait. And with any force, there's a real powerhouse. And we're a force for youth. We're a force for change. We're a force for good in the youth space. We want people with character traits, things like being authentic, being collaborative, being caring and fun, which are important. Being brave, if we're going to make decisions and we're going to do things differently, we need to be brave in those decisions and we need to stick to them. And then we have that progressive nature. We want to be pioneering and transformational. Now, not everybody will, fit all of those character traits, but as a team, we feel that we should try and tick off all of those character traits, and we can either learn from each other or support each other to be one of those. We then have a series of beliefs that are important again, and we have 8 beliefs, and I won't talk about all of them, but one of the belief beliefs that we have is that every young player is unique and has a different route into first team football. We must find the path together. And that working together with parents is the best way to create an environment in which their children can thrive. So with the discussions that again are going to come after this in terms of the way that this podcast will run, you'll see that common theme throughout. And then one of the other beliefs that we have is around, we believe in the power of the outlier, in diversity in thought and spirit. And these are critical to understanding growth and maturation. And as we said earlier, sort of working together as that force to try and do great things in youth development. We have a spirit of yes we can. We believe that yes we can. Who's to say that we can't? I mean, Griff alluded to the fact that we've gone from Category 4 to Category 2, and we've been the first club to miss a category out. So that's an important thing for us to believe in. And sometimes we say no we won't. So it's a choice to say that yes we can, but sometimes no we won't. And maybe that's a phasing sort of situation where we don't feel we want to travel at that speed of growth, and that we take a conscious, conservative decision to slow down our progress in order to do things right. And we think there's a real responsibility in that. And the reason why we think that responsibility is key to us is because our focus is about shaping tomorrow today. And we talk about that a lot around what have we done in our environment today that shapes tomorrow. When you ask yourself that question at the end of the day, what have you done that really makes a difference, not just in the here and now, but what's going to help these young, talented young people, athletes, future professionals. What have we done to help them get there? Did we just think about now, or did we do things that were going to be credible and actually sustain careers, and also give life skills that are going to help these young people who may go on and be in sport as athletes and as professionals, but also those that, like myself, who played in the system as a youngster and now work in a different aspect, and what skills and can we provide. And then our final sort of part of the page is around our GIC, our greatest imaginable challenge. And we're a brand new academy, but we have our purpose, which we're aspiring towards, but we also have challenge, which we're going to set ourselves, which is we're looking to try and achieve 3 Premier League debuts in 3 years. And considering 6 months ago we didn't have any groups, any squads, any players, the ambition there is very high. But we're close with our B team this year. We've had some players that have been in the first team squad in the Premier League and not quite made their way onto the pitch. And we know by challenging ourselves to that target that we will achieve first team debuts with our players, and maybe that's in cup competitions or pre-season friendlies, etc. But the ultimate aim is for our players to make Premier League first team debuts. That's what every team should be aspiring to, and we're no different.
Amazing. Thanks, Steve. Griff, anything else that may paint the picture before we dive into the bigger round table?
No, I guess really the aim of today is this will showcase one of the exciting things that are going on at the club. I think is an amazing opportunity to hear from Cam and Cassie and Gary from a Brentford point, and again hand in hand with some of the people that are part of that 40 stronghold that we've got. Des, Ryan, John Oliver and Sean come in. I think the wealth of experience in the conversation is just going to be amazing, and it's a testament to the hard work that's been done in this 9 to 16s program. I'm very, very proud of what the guys are achieving.
Amazing. Right, should we get into it? Let's get the other guys in, and thank you for the kind of groundwork that's been put in, so we can understand a bit more about the academy and why we're actually doing what we're doing with this podcast. So, Griff, Steve, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time. Cheers.
You're welcome.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Rob.
But thank you to the guys at Brentford and obviously everyone involved for the invitation for me to do this, and for you guys take the time to have a little chat around growth and maturation. So we're going to do 30-second intros. I'm not timing you, but I'm timing you. We'll go from left to right as you appear on my screen. So, Cassie, would you mind just giving us a brief introduction to you, and then we'll move on to John?
Yeah, so I'm Cassie. I'm the lead physio for the 9 to 16s group here at Brentford. I came on about 2 and a bit years ago, so started from when we were just at the community trust program and kind of evolutioned into what we are now as a Cat 2 status. So it's been a really satisfying journey seeing how we've gotten to where we are now, sitting with the people in this room.
Amazing. Thanks, Cassie. Over to you, John.
Yeah, hi, I'm John Oliver. I'm an Associate Dean of Research and a Professor of Applied Paediatric Exercise Science at Cardiff Metropolitan University.
Amazing. Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean Cumming. I'm a Professor of Sport and Exercise Sciences at the University of Bath, and I've been studying growth and maturation for quite a time now in a variety of different sports: football, tennis, rugby, all sorts.
Perfect. Thanks, Sean. Des.
Hi, Rob. Des Ryan, Director of Sport in the University of Galway. Prior to that, worked with Satanta College, Arsenal Academy for 9 years, Irish Rugby for 14 years. I'm an accredited strength and conditioning coach with UKCA, BASIS accredited and chartered scientist. And I'm very lucky to consult every 2-3 months with Brentford in this lovely environment here.
Amazing. Thanks, Des. Gary.
Hi, Rob. I'm Gary McDermott. I'm lead phase for the 11s to 14s. I've been doing it for 3 months now. Previously, I was at another Category 1 academy for 10 years, working across those age groups. So, really passionate about growth and maturation.
Amazing. Thanks, Gary. And last and certainly not least, Cam.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think compared to all of these more impressive people, mine's going to be pretty short and sweet. But I probably joined Brentford just under a year ago, and I lead the 9 to 16s athletic development program. So just helping that get off the ground this summer when we launched officially the 9 to 16 stuff. Excited for the chat to come.
Amazing. Well, thank you. I didn't have to cut anyone off there, so I really appreciate everyone sticking to the 30-second time limit. So I'm going to come to John first, and the first theme of discussion is, and hopefully it might be a simple one, but it might lead to different answers along the way, and that is, what is biological maturation? And I'll encourage anyone that's got anything to add, don't feel like it has to come back to me, just pile in. The more kind of natural conversation we can get, the better. So over to you, John.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So I guess quite simply, the process of maturation is that journey that a child goes through from childhood to achieving the adult state. So that happens across different biological systems, and we see it quite easily. It's sort of observable in front of our eyes as children grow, and then going from these small infants that we see to our fully developed adults. So that's how I put it in simple terms. I suspect Sean might have some insight he might want to add to the definition as well.
That's absolutely spot on, John. I guess the other thing might be to say that when we talk about maturity, we talk about it in terms of status, but we also talk about it in terms of timing. When we're talking about maturity status, we're talking about the stage of the journey. So somebody might be pre-pubertal, in the middle of puberty, or post-pubertal. But when we talk about timing, we're asking, is the individual maturing in advance or delay of their peers? We often consider individuals as being early, on time, or late maturers. And depending upon whether you're early, on time, or late, is largely down to genetics.
Is there anything in terms of the definition that sometimes gets misinterpreted, Sean, that's important to kind of nail down that? I would say so. Probably the biggest misconception is that relative age is an indicator of maturity. So we're all quite familiar with the relative age effect, that certain children are born at the start of the year and certain children are born at the end of the year. We often talk about Q1s and Q4s, and a lot of people will often assume that because you're born Q1 you must be an early maturer. No, the reality is whether you're early or late is going to be largely down to genetics. And in fact, when we look in the academies, we actually find quite a lot of quarter fours who are early maturers, because if you've been on the planet for a year less than some of your competitive peers, then you almost have to have something to help you have an additional advantage.
And often the case it's that they are early maturers. So yeah, just because you're born at the start of the year, it doesn't make you an early maturer.
Amazing. John, anything to add on that?
I just also going to bring in, although the first question is around maturation, I think what we'll find is we'll talk about growth and maturation as we go through this, and they're not the same thing, but they are interlinked. So as children mature, we see them go through different phases of growth, and that can be really key in terms of physically how they're developing, how they're responding to exercise, potential periods of heightened risk of certain types of injury, etc.
Cool. Going to come to you, Des. Why is it important to assess this?
Oh, it's all about knowing the player and knowing the person and knowing the player holistically. So if you're to truly understand, get to know, build a relationship with a youth athlete, knowing if they're an early developer or late developer or how fast they're growing at that moment in time is not the be-all and end-all, but it's a contributor to making good decisions in programming, understanding where they are in the stage of their development, when you're getting together to make decisions about how the program looks, should the player play across the age groups, what competitions you should enter, and good informed conversations with the parents. And it's all about education, really. And what I like about Brentford, so education is key, internal and external. People like Sean, John, when I come to Brentford, I learn and I share. And the journey in growth and maturation, biological maturation in terms of education is step one. I think there's 4 steps. I don't know what it is. Please tell me. Step 2. Oh yeah, I know what it is, but you don't really. Step 3. I have a few more questions. I need to get a bit more detail there. And then step 4, it lives and breathes. So, because there's so many people here, that's interdisciplinary. And in Brentford, they've gone through that journey. There's what I call career academy people here in the interdisciplinary team. And they love, live, breathe, academy, youth development. And having that information just makes so much informed decisions. You understand the player better, you know the player better, there's a strong relationship with the player and the parent. And that's one of the big drives of Brentford, to be caring and progressive. Now, caring is looking after the player, the relationship, knowing the player, and making informed decisions.
Cam, I'm going to get you involved here because you're in the thick of it day to day on this front. How do you go about assessing it? And I'll come to you, Cassie, because you had to probably let someone in or tell someone to go away from the office door a minute ago. But I'll get you involved as well.
No, it's a really good question. I think Des has really nailed it in terms of the caring and progressive piece and understanding a greater context of these young players and these young boys. In terms of how we assess it from a day to day, we try and take measurements from the players, i.e. standing heights and weights, every 12 weeks. And then for the players that are in that period of peak height velocity, so between 88 to 95% of predicted adult height, we try and take those a bit more regularly. So we'll do those every 6 to 8 weeks, just because we know that they can be extra sensitive to changes in like periods of rapid growth. We know that they're more sensitive to changes in training load, and it can predispose them to greater injury risk. So we just want to really have a good handle on monitoring them a little bit more often, and then those measurements get inputted into our database, which then changes their percentage of predicted adult height, and then it's a case of reporting that in a way to key stakeholders that's digestible and easy to act upon.
From a Premier League point of view, Cam, is that the standard scenario that you have to go through, or is there something that you've added on, or what's the kind of protocol from a Premier League point of view?
No, that's typically the done thing. The Camish-Roche equation is the widely used version in the Premier League at the minute. We chose to stick with that off the back of Sean and Des's guidance, as well as what we felt was feasible from a practical standpoint, because we know that we've got a massive amount of players, and we need to be able to make these measurements as accurate and as repeatable as possible. So we didn't want to add into the equation seated height for something like a Meerwald the Millwall method, just because we didn't want to add any greater potential for error. So we wanted to just do what we do really well and keep it simple for this first season, and then maybe look to expand it as the program develops.
Let's dive in.
And just an example, when I came over to the Premier League Academy, I was in stage 2. I had a lot to learn, but I thought I knew it all. So I was using a different method in Irish rugby. This is many years ago now. And then I came to the UK, I learned from Sean, and I was doing the measurements every month. And I was probably losing a session every month. And then Sean came along. And this is all part of the journey and why it's so important to share, get together, learn CPD. He was like, Des, what do you do every month for? You don't need to. And that's where I learned about the spacings and times of measurements that Cam spoke about. And that's really good practice. And I must compliment the Premier League for bringing this to life, and one of the best environments for assessing biological maturation. But the real good academies don't just measure it, don't just record it, don't just put it on the PMA. It lives and breathes in meetings, decisions, feedback, and actions.
John, carry on.
Yeah, and just trying to bring in another example. When I first started out, somewhat depressingly, well over 20 years ago, studying at Exeter University, I was lucky enough, to be able to do work with Exeter City Football Club, where we were helping with the testing and monitoring of their academy players. And they were, like Des said, they were routinely measuring height as part of that suite of testing. They were doing it on a very regular basis, and actually it was partly saying, well, we don't need to go that regular. But also they were already getting this information on height, but at that time they weren't using it to look at what that meant in terms of growth rates. And as soon as we did that simple just calculation to get a growth rate and gave that to the coaches and explained about things like some players, when they're growing rapidly, will experience a period of awkwardness. Their coordination will be a bit disrupted. It was like a light bulb moment for some of the coaches of going, oh, that explains why this under 14 players, as they put it, had lost their touch. That sort of technical element, the skill element of football. And actually then from the coach's side of view, they felt that they were able to go away and have conversations with the player to help them understand how the changes in the body were affecting the play, that it would be a temporary thing, that they'd be able to get through it. And the field's moved on a lot since then, but I still think those sort of simple approaches are good. But actually now we know much more about how we measure maturity as well, how we can use that, and it's great to see how clubs like Brentford are really getting hold of that to take this really sort of individual and long-term approach to player development.
Let's get Gary in first, then come to you, Sean. I'm the first person not to unmute the mic. Sorry, it was always me. Gary, off you go.
Rob, thanks. I've been panicking thinking it would be me to be the first one, so I'm delighted it was you. Thank you for that. I couldn't help but laugh when Des was talking about, I kind of get maturity with the stages, but then I kind of don't. It reminded me actually about when we were doing the first bit of testing here in measuring. A lot of the parents were kind of like, oh, what? I wonder how tall Messi's parents were. And it reminded me about the importance that we have here on education of why we do it. And yeah, it was great to see that after that we followed up with the parents to say, like, this is why we do it and how and what it looks like. And also the caring part for us is so we can measure when those like growth spurts are happening and what we can do to modify or adapt training to ensure that ultimately your son stays on the pitch and is a part of training still. So yeah, it was good. It was refreshing actually to hear John then when he said about lost their touch. I remember myself thinking, I remember he used to be able to do that. Now he can't do it. So yeah, it was good. Took me back.
John, carry on.
Yeah, I was saying that what Cam's doing there at Brentford is definitely excellent practice in terms of regular assessments with the Camus Roche. And as John pointed out, if you're getting the Camus Roche data, you're naturally getting the height data, and you can calculate those growth velocities. And if you have both sets of data, that can confirm whether an athlete is indeed in the growth spurt. If we're saying 88 to 95, they're also showing as a rate of growth that's, say, 8, 9, 10, 12 centimetres per year, we know that they're in the middle of the growth spurt. But also simply visual observation of the child in terms of looking at those changes. Are they all legs at this point of time? In puberty, we start to go through that growth spurt in the torso, we get the broadening of the shoulders, elongation of the face, broadening of the cheekbones, squaring of the jaw. If you can take in as much information as possible, that'll help make your decisions as well informed as possible. So I think as much information you can gather is important, but also recognising the limitations of these methods that we do use.
Sorry, Sean, just reiterate to us that kind of flag, 8, 9, 10 centimetres a year, is that what you said?
Yeah, so when we're looking at the peak of the growth spurt, the average kind of peak of the growth spurt in boys is about 10 to 12 centimetres per year. It's usually about 8 to 10 centimetres in girls. But if you're measuring regularly enough, due to the episodic nature of growth, so it's almost like we get this rapid growth and then we fill in the skeleton, rapid growth again. If you're measuring regularly enough, it's not uncommon to find rates of growth anywhere up to 20 to 25 centimetres per year. Again, you would really have to be measuring on a regular basis to identify that. And of course, those are the kind of phases where the athlete's going to be particularly at risk for injury. So I think what Cam's doing in terms of increasing the frequency to better monitor the athletes at that period of the growth spurt is just excellent practice.
Amazing, thank you. Cassie, from your perspective, why, and your kind of area of expertise, why is this area so important?
Yeah, I think what everyone touched on, we know the amount of injuries within growth and maturation and academy is massive. We also know that the more injuries players have, the less likely they're going to progress through those stages of the academy. So we know this is something, when we launched this academy, that we needed to get right, and this is why we brought on experts like John, Des, and Sean to help us create a system to help prevent those injuries or reduce the burden of those injuries. And we've been really great working with Gary, and who's been so bought on to wanting to work with us. And I think that's made huge help for me and Cam, is having coaches bought into this program of wanting to modify and optimize players' training and loading to make sure we do reduce that risk of injury.
Just for a bit of extra context, Cassie, and Cam mentioned doing it every 12 weeks. How many people are involved in that process?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we're on a split site, so I think a lot of academies, it's always kind of a mixture depending on who's where and what day, the practical elements of running the academy. Usually the sports science and AFDEV team kind of take those measurements. Where the physio team comes in is we're monitoring symptoms kind of throughout that period. So we're making note of anyone who's flagging up any oscars or severs or hip apophysitis type pain. And then we use those symptoms with Cam, and then we're creating this group, these flags of players who we think are most at risk. And those players are what we're calling part of this growers group. And that's where that group is going to see different types of training. They might be more optimized, so we're reducing what they're doing, total training volume, both here and away from Brentford, just to make sure we're covering all our bases and reducing their injury risk.
Amazing, thanks Cassie. Jump in, Cam.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in terms of who takes the measurements, that might be the sports science team, but the whole interdisciplinary team has a massive role to play in the optimization of these players' development plans. Like Gary leads a brilliant team with the under 13s and 14s, where they'll do a daily session plan, and they'll look into the specifics of which players they're going to emphasize with that training session. And part of that is looking at the growers group and understanding the activities and the components of training that may aggravate symptoms. So if it's an Osgood, something like a possession drill where it's heavy on accels and decels, that might be aggravating. So we know that we might need to optimize their training in that piece, and we might maybe choose something that's less taxing but is still going to keep them on the pitch, integrated with the team, and also developing as a footballer.
Sean, dive in.
Yeah, staying on the topic of measurement, a question we were asked when we first started our Premier League Growth and Maturity Screening Programme was at what age should we actually start these measurements? And the general recommendation is from about 9 years of age. Now, yes, most boys will probably take off in adolescence at 11, but as we said, some boys will be very, very early, and some of those boys may accelerate in their growth spurt from the age of 9. And of course, severs is one of those injuries that we typically see very early on, because it's the foot that will experience the growth spurt first. So we talk about growth being a distal to proximal event. So if you want to cut down on the injuries from those early developers, certainly starting the process at 9 wouldn't be a bad idea.
John, dive in.
Yeah, and just picking up on some of that differential timing and how it really helps Brentford as practitioners to look after the players. It's when a player is going through the peak of that growth spurt, Sean's mentioned the distal to proximal. What we'd also see is a child growing rapidly as the long bones grow really long first. But what they haven't developed at that time is a lot of their bone mineral density. So actually that comes after the growth spurt and is a bit more of a slow burner going through into late adolescence to get the real strength in the bone. And similarly, when the long bones have grown, they tend to stretch the muscle and tendons and put more pressure on points of insertion, and the growth in the muscle and tendon tissue follows that bone growth. So there's a sort of sequence of events to growth and maturation, and the practitioners having an understanding of that and that awareness through monitoring again can just really help with that player care and individualisation.
Gary, over to you.
Yeah, I feel like like you're saying there, John, around the long bone. Typically what we notice is the players, in terms of their receiving skills, ball mastery, they kind of lose that kind of bit of proprioception and lose that ability because their bone is actually grown a lot more than what it was before. So it's like, wow, what happened there? My foot it's gone past me or under my foot. So yeah, we actually play a big emphasis, the team here. I know that Cass mentioned about the growers group, but ball mastery is a big part of our programme and supporting the players for that to develop those proprioception skills still whilst they're growing. We think is we're doing it for the future. The long-term gain is long-term player development over kind of what we can do now to get them on the grass maybe. But yeah, to have that ball mastery emphasis placed on the future is something we're really big on. And yeah, the meetings that we hold to try and support those players that are growing. I love them because it helps me develop so much as a coach, because when you say, what can that player do, what can't that player do, for the ones that are maybe that possession practice is too much for them and the accels and decels, okay, we can put them on the outside, we can challenge them this way, that way. And the thing I love here is everyone can chip in and say actually we could challenge him this way. Maybe you could put him on one touch there so he's not doing much running around. It could help him with his scanning, etc. Those conversations that we have daily on sessions I really like it.
Gary, is 37 still is too old to complain and use growth as my bad touch? I'm guessing it is.
I thought you were talking about me then, Rob. I was going to say I've got to look at a ball. I've got to look at a ball and get injured these days.
Is awful. Cam, you were first, I think, to unmute. You dive in.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to ask John about the bone density piece, because it just made me think about the importance of strength training in those sorts of age groups. Are we able to actually cause any change in bone densities and maybe like mitigate the risk a little bit of potential bone issues by front footing strength training in an appropriate manner?
Yeah, it's a real good question, Cam, and absolutely. The good news is, I guess, very broadly to start with, is that children, adolescents, they're always adaptable. So as coaches, we can always be doing something positive with them, and that holds true for increasing bone mineral density. And over the last probably 20 years or so, there's been discussions around windows of opportunity. Should we be focusing on particular types of training at particular periods of time? I won't get fully into that debate, but I think probably one area where we really can and where it's really most important is bone mineral density. because the bone mineral density that a person has at the end of adolescence will track into adult life. So it will determine their bone health, into later life. And that's really important. So, this applies at a population level, physical activity guidelines, the WHO, NHS. They recommend that children should be taking part in muscle and bone strengthening exercise. And that's where we think sport can really help with that. And certainly, children who are fortunate enough to be in academies like Brentford, where they can get access to resistance training, is a really good form of exercise to strengthen the bone. What we need is mechanical loading. We need quite a lot of variety in that mechanical loading, and that's where we get the bone stimulus from. In terms of that interdisciplinary approach, what we also need is a good nutrition that goes with that. The energy balance is really important. We probably, I think, as just parents, and I count myself as a parent, we just sometimes don't realise how much energy it takes just to grow. It takes a lot. And then you take a child who's doing quite a lot of training and activity as well, and that's more energy they're putting into the system. But they need energy as well to help with the growth. And if we starve them of that, that can have a negative impact on bone health and bone mineral density. So it's that interdisciplinary team of getting the resistance training going on with the players, giving them good education about nutrition, giving them access to good nutrition. And I must say I was fortunate to come into the club before we started and see the food that was on display in the cafe, and it was really impressive. So good food choices available, which is important.
Des, over to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to highlight there, those last few conversations, descriptions, questions are the perfect example of the academy purpose coming to life. And I love that in an academy, that there's alignment of purpose. And if you look over Gary's left shoulder, there's the purpose on a page. And that's in every room. And that brings great clarity. And the top part of it is to be admired as the most caring and progressive football academy in the world. Now, to do that, that's a long-term journey. You've got to put things in place. But you can clearly hear from the conversations there the thought, the effort, the education, the questioning, in order to bring this to a trustworthy, high-level place. And caring, I want to emphasise that in this environment, because what we're doing this to value the player. If you're to be cared, you have to feel valued. Now, gathering all that information and players understanding it, parents understanding it, using it to inform the programme, playing decisions, it is very caring. And I know when I hang around this environment, I hear lots of laughter of the young people when they're training. I see lots of fulfillment in the young people when they're given challenges, sometimes based on biological maturation. And I like to see excitement when they achieve things. So that's living and breathing here, but it doesn't just happen by accident. It isn't just one person, the coach stays in the session. It's the interdisciplinary people using progressive methods like what we discussed to bring it to life.
Gary, do you want to make a final point on this and we'll move on?
Yeah, sure. It was just on John's point around the energy it takes to grow and the brain development as well. My experience of kind of this age and the amount of information that they can take on and the amount of information they can forget as well. I know Sean will probably laugh when I make this example, but at those ages, if they're on the pitch and you're overloading them with tactical information, backed with what John was saying around the energy it takes to grow, you're going to get an absolute time bomb. So we've worked really hard here to ensure that the information we give is concise. We'll make sure we do it in certain breaks, not loads during the game because there's too much going on, and also through peers as well. And then lastly, just the other bit was around kind of recall and retaining information. So the importance for us within breaks, as an example in games, to go over what we've discussed. A way of us, one, checking understanding, being progressive, but two, to ensure the players are aware of kind of what we're asking them to do. Really important because, yeah, like we said, they do forget and we don't want to overload them.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. That probably brings us to the end of that little topic, but I'll probably stick with you, Gary, because the next thing that I wanted to chat around was the talent ID piece and how this information can be used from a talent ID perspective, and we'll kind of branch off that from an athletic development perspective and a injury prevention as well. So Gary, do you want to have a little chat to us about that?
Yeah, no problem. I guess, from a talent ID perspective, it's really important for us to know their biological age, because it allows us to compare kind of what I would deem apples with apples. We will try and move them across bands. So we are dual band here. We do like age group dual band 13, 14. And in there you'll get some outliers that will be real early maturers, okay, and probably some that will be real late maturers. I think if you look at it on its simple form, that if the early maturer, he comes in, he's probably going to be really physically dominant, quite a big stature within the group. If you then move them into where they're biologically going to fit, and they're still a good performer, they're still looking like they've got good potential, that will then kind of highlight to us as yes, this could be a potential signing for us. Equally with the late maturer, if they're perhaps performing into the different band or their appropriate band and they're performing really well, that will give us an insight into, yes, this player is something that we could definitely work with along with the other aspects holistically.
Des?
And the exciting thing in this area, there's a lot of talent. And even Bukayo Saka was born 4 miles away from the training ground there in Ealing. So it's finding that talent, understanding that player when they come in. Every group needs leaders, and you got the academy director, Steve, and you got Gary, the lead of the phase. Everyone working together, the scouts, of course, the scouts bring in the players. But now, how can science and medicine happen? Well, when the player is identified as a possible, let's do the test. Let's look at it in the context of biological maturation. And in my early years, we might have just tested the trialist, and these are random figures. 30 metres in the counter movement jump. Okay, if we look at it at under 14, standards, average. But as we evolved, and what is in place here, if you look at it in the context of biological maturation and percentage of adult height, 30 is above average. Now we've got a clue, and they're only clues. And as what happens here, people sit at a round table, contributions from scouts, coaches, science and medicine, etc. And you make better decisions. And the information that can be contributed from all those areas help in that talent ID. So it's so exciting if you maximize the use of biological maturation in many areas, but talent ID is one of them. And as Sean Wells knows, the number of late maturers that is in the environments in Premier League is small, and if that grows, you'll find some gold there. But I don't want to totally focus on the late maturers. I truly believe the early developers need help in extra technical work, and again, because there's awareness in this club, that's what happens there. Because in the past I've seen so many early maturers live in 9s, 10s, 11s, up to under 16s, moved under 18s, 21s, and it's a bit more challenging technically, and physically the others have caught up. So the extra work in the technical. So having this information helps every player.
Cam, you're next, but I'd like to get Cassie involved in this talent ID question as well, just from a medical physio perspective. But yeah, Cam, carry on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to piggyback on what Des has just pointed out. We just did a recent case study of a couple of players in our 13s and 14s age groups. So like almost the most biologically immature and the least biologically mature. And it turns out there was about 10% difference in where they were at in terms of their percentage of predicted adult height. So quite a big variation. And we looked at all of their physical metrics, and we did a deep dive on the technical, tactical ability as well. And what we found was that the under 13 in the age group performed really poorly in lots of the physical metrics because they were less biologically mature. But then when we biobanded that, they actually showed really good potential by performing above the average. And the performance potential matrix is something that we use in the academy to discuss players and their individual development plans. And so just having this extra layer of context for the interdisciplinary team just gives a more meaningful insight into where the player's at now, but like Des says, gives you a clue as to where they could potentially get over the long term.
Cassie, I'm coming to you in a minute, but Cam, you can't say performance potential matrix without me getting interested and wanting to hear more. Tell us a bit more about that, if you can.
Yeah, if I can, yeah. I mean, to be fair, it's more of a coaching football thing. So Gary's probably better placed to talk about it. But essentially, we map out players where they are at in terms of, are they high performing as expected, or low performing currently, and then we basically have the same thing along the other edge in terms of potential. And this basically allows us to look at players and to discuss them as we see them now, and then we can almost make action plans as to how we can, you know, give them more of what they need to maybe perform better now, or to lift their potential for the long term. And it's just a nice, useful visual for us when discussing players. But I don't know if Gary's got more to add on that.
Of course, yeah. I'll help you out with that one, Cam. I guess the example I wanted to use, I was going to jump in after Des said about the early maturers needing a bit more tact. Something I feel like we've done really well as an IDT is the players' IDPs, so individual development plans. So I'll use, I guess, a case study we've done as an example. We've been really clever, I feel, with one of the early maturers in the group. As you can imagine, Sean will laugh again. He's the big, physical, he looks quick, he gets the ball, he runs past people. So performance-wise, he's, you know, a good, strong performer. However, long-term potential, if he kept doing that until he's 21, when everyone else has called him up, he's probably we're not gonna help him see his long-term potential. So what we've done is been clever with his IDP. We've used clever language in terms of helping him with his tech. So dominating opponents. For him, the big early mature, lovely. He's bought into that straight away. But we've also used receiving in behind the opponent, or bouncing around the opponent, you know, to develop the tactical, receiving in behind, knowing the timing, how he does it, how does he get in behind, what type of run, and then the technical with the bouncing around. How can he draw a defender in? How close does he get to then be able to use his teammates to bounce around the opposition? And then for me, the bit around caring comes in. Des will like this. We've used Bukayo Saka as his favourite player. So there's clips that we've got coach analysts here who get clips, and that's within his IDP. So we've got clips of Saka doing those things. And then lastly, we've looked at what I've nicked it from one of the guys here in terms of sparring partners. So who are we going to put him up against and why within training? So we've kind of tried to match him against the other early maturers to see how he does with that. So putting him against a fullback who's also an early maturer, what does he do? Does he then develop that technique a little bit better? Does the tactical side come from it? And then also recognising when does he need the success? Does he need to go against a slightly later maturer? Do we dial it down for a little period? Then do we go up? So hopefully I've given you a bit of justice there, Des and Cam.
Cam, interestingly, do you do that from an athletic development perspective? If you're pairing like guys up in the gym, would you do that as well, like Gary's just mentioned?
It's something that we're looking to introduce in the near future in terms of bio-banding sessions. So at the moment we're constrained by logistics that we have to gym in our age groups, but hopefully sometime soon everybody's going to train on site at the same time, so it can allow us to be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more progressive with how we structure these sessions. The challenge that we face is that all of these players have different competency levels in terms of where they're at from a gym perspective. You know, the nature of the academy only being launched this season, some of these players we've only seen for the first time in August, and some of them will have had no prior strength and conditioning experience before. So lots of them are at different stages, but we definitely would like to bio-band groups so that we can, like John was alluding to earlier, almost take advantage of those windows of opportunity for accelerated development in certain physical qualities. So for our boys who are maybe pre-PHV, we can look to get into more neural training and plyometrics and bits and pieces that are gonna really help them from a motor learning and skill perspective. And then with our post-PHV boys, some of our earlier maturers, we can look to get more into strength and hypertrophy training, because we know that the body's able to really adapt to that sort of training.
I was just going to jump in, Rob. Cam's doing himself a disservice there. I've been in the gym with him many times, and he's got different groups going on with different stages of development. So I've seen him, with the ones that can put on the hypertrophy, they're in that group. The ones that need more proprioception, balance, coordination, movement skills, I've seen him differentiate like that. So yeah, he's being a bit modest there, I think.
I think, to be fair, it happens quite organically because we like to use almost a tiered system of progression. So I'll put up a session on the whiteboard or whatever, and it might have 3 different levels to it. So it might be that level 1 is the most rudimentary and basic. And naturally, they're competitive people, aren't they, these players? So they want to excel and they want to be doing what their peers are doing. So sometimes it can motivate a potentially flat gym session into really a successful and one that's promoting development. So it might be that the early maturers gravitate towards the level 3 sorts of things, where some of the later maturers maybe stay level 1 and level 2. And naturally it almost auto-regulates because they decide what load goes on the bar or what exercise they're choosing within reason. So it does happen quite organically.
Thanks, Cam. I'm going to come to you in a second, John. I'm just going to get Cassie involved from a talent ID perspective. From a medical physiotherapy medical side, where do you fit in that talent ID?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think one of the important things that we've touched on already that's important with Brentford is that interdisciplinary education that we do. So we gave a talk, myself and Cam gave a talk to all our staff here, including coaches, talent ID, player care, safeguarding, operations, anyone who's really involved in this 9 to 16s group, around what we're discussing now. What is growth and maturation and how does it affect injuries? I think one of the real positive outcomes of that chat was with the recruitment team. They want to start using those bio-banding and start getting our talent ID games in bio-banding matches. So we actually are now seeing, like Gary said, apples to apples. We're not seeing, and talent ID, someone who we would have only seen recruitment time once or twice, and now we're comparing a biological 16-year-old to a biological 14-year-old. Well, the 16-year-old should and will likely be the better player, but that's not always what we're after. Like we said, there are really late developers, and those are the gems. So I think from our point of view, that's been a real success for me and Cam this year, is getting that point across the whole staff and them buying in and seeing that. In terms of injuries within talent ID, I think that's something, as we're developing, we're still, in terms of injury surveillance, we have a few boys who have growth and maturation injuries, but we're still developing that system of how we can best reduce those injuries. And I think, like Cam said, it comes down to training load and gym, and making sure we get those right, and adding the added benefits of good nutrition, and then rounding that off with the education and that trust that we can develop with the parents and the players.
Amazing, thank you, Cassie. John, did you want to jump in before we go to Des?
Des, if you've got something coming off the back of Cassie, I
just
go ahead.
linking in with talent ID, something that came to my head that is a challenge, an issue even in academies when trialists come in, and they come in on their 2-week, 4-week, 6-week trial. They may come from grassroots, they may come from a non-football academy, they come from environments where they train twice a week, maybe twice a week in a match. Suddenly they're in a multi-session game week, different to what they're used to. And what I really like about here, the context of that is taken into consideration. The players are eased in the expertise of the professionals here on, are they able for it, keeping an eye on them. Similarly, when the interdisciplinary team get together and they're looking at the training week ahead, and they're making decisions like what Kathy discussed earlier on about the rate of growth, the percentage of adult height, the pain measurements out of 10, the observations from the coach in the technical areas on the pitch and Cam on the pitch, the observations from Cam in the gym. Okay, we're not going to make decisions by numbers. We're going to make decisions by symptoms, is what's in place here. And then looking at all those different symptoms, right, what modification comes next? So that's the players on site, squad members, registered players. But similarly, it's an important topic, I think, with trialists. They go from one world of a lot less volume to another world, and here they're cared for, and that's managed appropriately.
John, does that link with anything you want to add? Yeah, carry on.
I just wanted to, I guess, flag and come back to what Cam was discussing around the physical development, just because it's probably the piece that always gets raised with me the most of, how as practitioners today, they manage to take all the different bits of information, that trying to think about maturity, and maybe there's different underlying systems that might develop more at a certain stage of maturity, neural system, sort of hormonal muscle system. How do you manage children growing quickly? How do you manage the fact that they're coming in with different levels of movement skill? And that is a real challenge, and it's great to see a progressive club like Brentford who go out there and just really look at all the evidence and knowledge that is around, and then apply it in the local context. Now, there are different ways to apply that knowledge, and you've got to make sure it fits in your context. But I think what's happening is exactly correct. Between all of that, it would be the competency that trumps, what a player can do, how well they can move, and that helps guide the physical development. But growth and maturity feed into that to provide more layers of knowledge. So we might typically think about, okay, as we physically train, we just do more progressive work that gets harder or more complex or more demanding, but actually the child who's growing rapidly, we've talked about that sort of technical side of maybe they get a bit of awkwardness and lose their touch, but also maybe they become a little bit less coordinated in their gym-based activity as well. There might be a need that actually, rather than making things more complex for a period of time, they have to be simplified, and just a little bit of relearning and refining of movement skills in the gym environment. So, there's lots to juggle there, and I think Cam and colleagues are doing a really good job on the piece on talent ID. Again, just to feed in a bit of evidence, I've been lucky to do a bit of work in Gaelic football. We haven't published this research yet, but hopefully it will come out soon. Looking at a large sample of under 15 players, so 14-year-olds, boys, sort of peak age for a lot of variability in maturity, going into a camp to then get selected for representative team. And we took some fitness and maturity measures as part of that. And when we analysed those who were selected and deselected, we found approximately an early maturing boy was 5 times more likely to be selected than a late maturing boy. Okay, so that's really clear, and having some knowledge of that can then help inform coaching decisions around talent ID. The other bit that I found fascinating, that I'm definitely not an expert on, so can't talk much to, but Sean will know a lot more here, are things beyond the physical. We default to the physical a lot because they're very measurable. But what about, how much are coaches looking at things like leadership qualities in a player, but actually how does maturity and opportunity to demonstrate that factor in? Sean, I don't know if you've got any insights on that. I just find it fascinating.
Yeah, well, certainly Megan Hill's done some fantastic work in this particular area, and she's found from her research, and this is over 5 years worth of historical data looking at match grades, that those early maturing boys, if you look at them in age groups, will get much superior match grades from coaches in terms of their evaluations in comparison to the late developers. And that typically peaks around the ages of, say, 14 or 15 years of age, where those early maturing boys are close to being fully mature. She also found in her research that there was a dip in match grades as well during the growth spurt. So most boys will typically have that little bit of a dip in growth spurt or match performance as they sort of navigate that growth spurt, which is also something to take into consideration. And the key problem is if you're only looking at the evaluation of these players within their age group, well, naturally those match grades are going to favour those early developers. And it's not surprising that in Megan's study, she found that that is exactly where the maturity selection bias started to kick in. So obviously the key thing you need to do, as we've spoken about earlier, is things such as biobanding, putting those players in slightly different environments where they don't have that advantage or they don't have that disadvantage. So you can now get an evaluation of a player, not just in their age group, but also when they're developmentally matched, which gives you a little bit more insight. And in addition, as I said, you want to know if a kid is in the middle of their growth spurt before you pull the trigger on a contract or a scholarship, because what you see during the growth spurt may be very different from what you saw before or after the growth spurt. So coaches play a really important role there. And as I said, these relationships we see between maturity and fitness, we equally see them represented in terms of match performance as well.
Lots of nodding going on there, Cam. I'll just go back to when kind of myself trying to get into football clubs at 14, 15, 16, and ended up going on holiday and basically sleeping the whole holiday, which obviously mum and dad were delighted with because I was growing at such a rapid rate. And that kind of brings me on to the more holistic view of the player, not just what you're seeing there for the 3 hours on a Monday night or whatever it is with a 13 or 14-year-old, but what's happening at home. What do you do, Cam, from away from Brentford side of things when it linking back to this growth and maturation piece?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we're lucky enough to have a really good and really proactive safeguarding and player care team. So there's lots of communication going back and forth between those staff and between the parents. I like to think that the Brentford environment is one where players can feel confident to come and talk to us about anything. And I have definitely seen that firsthand. And I think that those IDT meetings where we discuss players at length and in depth, we're able to share details and share knowledge so that everyone has a broader understanding and can almost kind of meet the player on their level. And in terms of managing things like training load and bits and pieces outside of the club, that's an area that we've found to be a challenge, because obviously schools are demanding, they might play other sports, there's lots of things going on in these kids' lives during these ages. So it's a case of getting out some sort of survey or questionnaire to better understand what it is that they're doing outside of Brentford, and then providing education pieces to parents around training load management, and particularly if you meet these criteria that we've set out for the growers group, we have a more in-depth sit down with these parents and players and go through their weekly schedule in a bit more depth and try and optimize it so that we're getting the blend of seeing them enough and making sure that we are developing them as footballers, but also giving them enough license to have a childhood. And I think that's the caring piece of Brentford. Like we want them to have a life outside of the football club, so we're very conscious of that.
Gary, do you want to dive in? I've just got a quick question for Des afterwards, just so Des is prepped.
Yeah, I just on piggyback on to what Cam said there, really, like the caring nature of what we do here is excellent. Whenever a player has a school match or they've got something going on, it's kind of a taboo sometimes. This, should he miss training or should he go to school? Whenever we've talked about it in an IDT, everyone just says, what's going to be the best experience for him? What's he going to look back on in 10 years' time and go, I'm glad I did that. We had one the other week. It was a school final. The player was a bit, should I be at training? Should I not? We all just said, I think it was one of the physio team, medical team said, what's going to be the best experience for you? And that was, like, for me, amazing to hear, just like how aligned everyone was to go, yes. Clearly the player went and played the school sports game and enjoyed his final, but that piece where I'd been at previously, it would be like, oh no, they've got to train, they've got to do this, when actually no, the right thing to do, one, for the player's experience, and two, for long-term development of where they're going to be, was to play in that school match. So yeah, it was really pleasing to hear.
That's probably a great example of what I was just going to ask Des about his time at Arsenal and how you actually managed the multiple things that these kids have got going on. Exams, school matches, other sports they may play. And is it sometimes the club, like Gary just mentioned, it's actually the club that has to make the decision to take the hit and let this, play for the school or do whatever it is?
Yeah, that was a great decision. That young man has a memory for life now, playing in a cup final with his buddies. That outweighs a training session. That's an academy specialist making a decision there. Lovely to see. And that's excellence. So often in sport we think winning the Premier League, that's excellence. But excellence is everywhere. And in the academy purpose on a page, one of the beliefs is a passionate, relentless pursuit of excellence. Excellence in academy is talking, making those decisions, educating the parents. And it's great to see a decision like that. And it's trust. And trust is built through communication and relationships. So parents can be your greatest ally. They can be challenging if they're not your greatest ally and they're not educated and communicated with properly. But what's in place here is good quality communication and education of parents. That solves problems. One of the problems is through enthusiasm, parents may want the young people to do extras outside of the club in many different areas. And in some cases, that's fine. In many cases, though, it might be adding too much load in the context of the information we discussed earlier on. So have an open, transparent discussions education and informed collaborative decisions, like we just heard. Yeah, play the match. Yeah, probably better to have a rest day, Friday. Please don't go off and do a 2 hours individual one-to-one session before your match on the Saturday. And eventually these principles become ingrained and clear in everyone's heads, and they know what's the right thing for the young person. And having an open and transparent discussion and education on playing different sports or different interests. Learn to play guitar, go on your school tour, go on your debating team. And I know this club encourages the individual and lots of diversity in the unique journeys of every player. And every player is a unique journey. We can't put a straight line from the academy to the first team. We need these discussions to figure out how that journey goes and helping the player along that journey.
Great. Thanks a lot, Des. Right.
Sorry, I meant to emphasise. I always say this. First team is easy. 20 players, 24 players, one team, one competition. Academy, hundreds of players, hundreds of parents, hundreds of support people. Complexity, different stages of maturation. It's wonderful. No, different people suited to different areas. No disrespect to the first team people, and it is challenging. I'm only jesting. But now you're dealing with young people, children, and we touched on it earlier on. In the past, we've had situations where players hadn't enough of food in the household. Players were sleeping on couches. Players were in difficult scenarios financially. Not every player, and I don't want to stereotype soccer players. You get the full spectrum of socioeconomic class in the academy environment. But if the environment is good and there's those meetings and those trust, eventually clues, comments, discussions, bring those to life, and then they can be addressed. Then they can be supported and solved. So that's more the holistic side of it. As we discuss and have these conversations in different disciplines, these come around, and different people are best suited to dealing with different issues.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Des. So we've mentioned biobanding a couple of times. So I'd like to bring it back to you, Sean. What are the benefits, and we've touched on a couple that have kind of come through in the conversation anyway, but benefits of organising biobanding games, and for the individuals, the benefits of playing up and playing down?
Well, there seems to be benefits for both early and late developers, but they very much vary different upon the sort of requirements that are placed upon the athletes. So when we have the early developers bio-banded, all of a sudden they don't possess those physical advantages that they might have in their age group games. They have to find technical or tactical solutions. They're also playing against older players who are smarter, wiser. Many of those older players are taking them under their wing as well, so it's almost a mentoring process going on too. In fact, when we looked at it, probably the biggest advantages are actually for those early early developers who are not getting stretched enough in their age group games and may rely too much upon their physicality. Now with the late developers, they do come back saying it is less of a physical challenge, but it does give them that opportunity to command the game for once, to actually use their technical, tactical and physicality. We know from the age group data that those late developers are getting about 1,000 less minutes for some of them per season in terms of actual gameplay. And so here's an opportunity where they actually should be expected to lead and command a game for once, and actually get the opportunity to be evaluated by coaches, by academy staff in slightly different environments. And I guess the key thing is it presents new challenges and learning opportunities for the athletes, but it also provides a new environment in which to actually evaluate the players, so benefits for coaches and for scouts as well. Now, when we first started doing the biobanding, we really didn't know what we were going to find, but the clubs have developed this concept since then, and so what we see is a lot more sort of emphasis upon psychological support going into biobanded phases. So early developers are taught about the challenge and struggle that they will face and given those types of skills and tools to be able to deal with that. Whereas our late developers are more likely to be aligned in terms of sort of support on leadership, about mentorship, all sorts of things they typically wouldn't be doing in their age group games. So certainly from the data, we're getting clear evidence and consistent evidence for both earlies and for lates, but the whole process in terms of how biobanding is being implemented is still developing as we go through the process.
John, carry on.
Yeah, just it's a really interesting field, and Sean's really led the work in this area. So I'm really grateful for that. The terms playing up and playing down of what we've been routinely using in research and practice, and it describes those children within age groups who are different levels of maturity going and playing with their maturity match peers. They're biobanded together. It was just something I picked up on coming into the club, actually into this, is that see Brentford have given it another level of thoughtfulness now, and the way they're pitching it is actually players playing across age groups, I think is the terminology they're wanting to use. So, they've done a bit of reflection within the club and actually thought, well, actually using the terms playing up and down with the players, maybe that might cause a bit of anxiety or resistance. And, it's great to see that thoughtfulness. And again, a sport, and in this instance, a club, taking what's been done and evolving it and thinking about their own context. And this field is evolving, and it's definitely going to keep evolving. And it's really good where we can see sports taking ownership of that and driving things forward.
Des?
Yeah, great opportunity, those biobanded games. They're not the be all and end all. They're another way of viewing the player and different challenges. And that's what I love about them. And I've observed here and in other environments, nice challenges, different challenges for the player compared to the chronological age group matches. Like the player welcomes the team to the environment and he brings them to the dressing room. It may be a shyer type of player, a player who needs to do a bit of work in school, gets the percentage of adult height of a squad, and he has to work out the average percentage adult height. And okay, you can use your phone, no problem. A player is captain, not usually captain. A player dribbles with the ball more than he would do. A player passes and goes with the balls more than he would do. And then a golden opportunity for the scouts to watch, and the coaches and everyone, to watch those players that have been discussed in the player progress meetings that are late matures or early developers. Now they're in a different context. Let's zoom in on these early and lates and see how they perform in a more equal environment. And now you've got good knowledge, good assessment, good environment for the player to be challenged in a fair way, and compare and contrast to the chronological challenges and competitions. So a great opportunity. Takes a lot of work though, and has to be done scientifically and professionally.
Thanks, Des. Gary, you unmuted first. I think I'll come to you in a minute, John.
Yeah, thank you. Just talking about the social impact of bioband. So it was interesting. We did our bioband the other week. Because we're quite unique with the dual banding, it was really interesting to see we had some chronological age boys that were under 15s that were playing with some under 13s. They knew each other's names. They were fine. They were talking to each other. It was amazing, and I've not seen that before. But I guess that's the unique fluidity of what we're doing here. We're big on finding the appropriate level of challenge for the boys, and we've got no qualms about playing players in different groups. You know, one of the beliefs is around every young player is different, and we must find the right path together to the first team. So whether that means that you're playing in a different group to your chronological age does not matter at all. We're going to work as hard as we can to find the appropriate level of challenge for you on that match day. And it just, it was really highlighted like how well they got on, because they've trained together before, they've played together before. So I thought it was a really insightful weekend of biobanding.
Just out of interest, Gary, is that going to continue as the academy developed in terms of the dual age groups being together?
Yeah, we're big believers in it. Big believers in it. We think it's really important. I think we're even going to progress it to more biobanding, as more times with biobanding as we can. But yeah, just bigger believer. I think it removes the stigma, if I'm being honest, around I'm playing down or up, or it's just a cross. That's your band. That's what you're playing in. You'll train with older people this year. Next year you'll be the oldest. You'll train. You know, it's all about us finding the right level of challenge. And as I touched on earlier, when we have these IDT meetings and IDP meetings with the players, we're trying to find that level of challenge, both within training and matches. So I use it as a sparring partner. Who's he going up against and why? Why are we doing that? How are we going to challenge him? What does that level of challenge look like? So, yeah, we feel like it's unique, and I'm pleased to be a part of it.
Amazing, thanks, mate. Over to you, John.
Yeah, Gary's already started to allude to some of the answer here. I wanted to be a little bit controversial, or play devil's advocate at least. So I wanted to maybe take over your job for 1 minute, Rob, and
feel
pose
free,
the
John,
question to the rest of the floor, and maybe particularly those at the club. We we've heard a lot about the benefits of biobanding, and we've got good evidence for that. I know a comment or question that's come back to me before when I've talked about biobanding is the sort of response of, okay, so should we replace chronological age groups altogether and just have biobanded teams and groups, or is the value in both the chronological age groups, the biobanded tournaments, and I guess how do you see the fit of it all coming together?
Gary's unmuted. Gary's ready to go.
I guess one of our beliefs is the relentless pursuit of excellence. I think there is no, if everyone had the right answer, everyone would be doing it, right? So there is no strong, this is what we're doing, but we're all pursuit in trying to get that right method for the player and their development. So I think there needs to be a blend, and you find the right blend per player. Like, everyone's different. So there might be times when we do bioband. There's times when it's important that we do what we're doing with our dual band, because that's how we're going to challenge those players. If I was constantly putting you under stress as an early developer, you're going through PHV, then that's not the right level of challenge for you at that particular moment. So the bioband might not be right for them. So it's important that they train and play in a different group. So yeah, I guess trying to differentiate between each player is something that we do, and I feel is really important.
Des?
Yeah, I always use the analogy of a bottle of water, sparkling water. So if you look at it from the rear, that might be chronological matches. You can see where it's from, the address and what goes into it. If you look at from the side, you see a bit of the label, and that may be playing across with older players. And then you go to the other side and you're getting clues about what it is. Okay, that's playing across with younger players. And then you look at the front, that might be bioband. And these can be interchangeable. Oh, that's Galway sparkling water. So now you know the player and you know the potential in the player. But it takes a few different views to see that. And all those different views, playing across, playing chronological, playing biobanded, are very helpful. And there may be cases where there's a late developer and he is an exceptional talent. And if he goes into biobanding, it may be too easy for him. So these are informed decisions by the coaches, mainly leading the discussion on how they can be used. So they're all needed, and nothing should be a dramatic change to something new. But there is a need for it to grow. It doesn't happen as much as it could in many sports, and it's great to see clubs like this, and in particular soccer, leading the way in the area. A lot of other sports are benefiting from what's being practiced in these environments.
We'll come to you, Gary, but Cassie, I'm just going to ask you about injury risk reduction in a second, but Gary, you go first. You're unmuted.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm definitely going to nick that bottle analogy from you, Des, if that's okay. I was just going to jump on the varied diet being key. You know, if you just have one thing, that's probably what you're going to have. So the varied diet and the experts that I'm lucky enough to work with, providing the insight into going, I think that's the appropriate level of challenge for that player for this match day or for that training week or for the next 6 weeks, I think is really key.
So biobanding from an injury risk reduction, Cassie?
Yeah. I mean, Sean talked about a bit earlier about how we have those distal to proximal type of injuries with growth and maturation. We also see that pre and post maturation, we're getting different types of injuries. So we're knowing in post, once the boys put on a bit more muscle mass, a bit more explosive, we start to see those more muscle types of injuries. Whereas a bit earlier, we're seeing those more growth maturation types of injuries. So it could be like a severs and Oscars or hip apophysitis. So we just want to take that information that we get from where they sit in that bioband and, like I said, finding that appropriate challenge. So at times, the example is someone's circa PHV, they're an on-time developer. Where is that challenge coming from? If they're struggling match minutes-wise, load-wise, to play for 90 minutes, for 80, what it is for that age group, is playing across with a younger age group for that bioband actually more appropriate, because now the load is going to be less intense in those naturally younger age groups. So does that fit better, and does that reduce that risk of that player's injury? I think, again, that just comes down to the IDT team having those conversations and selecting what's best for that player in that period of time.
Perfect. Thanks, Cassie. Oh, go on, Des.
Yeah, and I will say it's very good to have someone like Cassie who has a strong understanding of growth-related injuries and biological maturation. Because if it's not, it can lead to tension. And you could have a very knowledgeable S&C about it and a physio who's starting out in their journey on it, or vice versa. And when they're making decisions, it can lead to tension. So having two people who are well versed and experts in the area leads to good decisions. But what I will suggest to people listening, particularly sports scientists, strength conditioners, remember scope of practice. The physio is the medical practitioner. Their call on injuries is the call. We can discuss, we can workshop, we can collaborate, we can share, but they have the real in-depth knowledge of the growth-related injuries and anything else that may be more sinister that we don't know about, and that's why we have to be very respectful to the chartered physios, etc.
Amazing. I'm going to ask a question for Cam here. Apart from those on this panel externally from Brentford, who else do you look to in this space that kind of influence what you do? I know this isn't on the sheet that we're discussing, but I'm just interested in, for people that are listening, maybe seek out other experts in this particular area.
Yeah, well, I don't want to make your head too big, Rob, but listening to your podcast and reading your articles on Sportsmith has been a really big help for me. I think, it's actually Cassie's conception, but the growers group, the red flag system that we use was actually kind of piggybacked from the research that Sean and David Johnson have done in terms of the percentages of predicted adult height, in terms of the growth rate, and looking at the bits and pieces that David did at Bournemouth with modifying training load and looking at the outcomes that had in terms of time loss as a result of growth-related injury. Those are the big influences on us, and like you say, everyone who's on this call as well.
Amazing. John, in terms of more academic, and Sean for that matter, more academic resources, where would you signpost people for more information, more, like I say, academic information on this?
I think it's probably been well documented in academic circles that there's been a bit of an explosion of review work over recent years, and that's a bit of a double-edged sword. But on the positive side, there are quite a few very well written, very strong reviews in each of the particular types of areas we've talked about, whether it's biobanding, whether it's growth and injury, whether it's sort of maturity and physical development and resistance training. Reviews that really synthesize a lot of evidence to say the state of play as it currently is. So what we know, how strong the evidence is in that field, what we don't know, what future researchers need to do to plug some of the gaps. And it's been a burgeoning field since I started out over 20 years ago, 2002, as a researcher in the area. It's just really proliferated in terms of the evidence we've got. So going to sources where that has been synthesised, I just think reputable review work is really, really valuable. And it's a good starting place just to get a good oversight of the evidence base before then, finding your particular niche areas of interest and starting to dig a bit deeper.
Sean, any additions?
Yeah, I would just add that there is a fantastic book which has been written by two academics out of Cardiff Met on youth physical development. The names now lose me at this moment. John Oliver and Rodri Lloyd. Their text they've got on youth athlete development, strength and conditioning. Absolutely fantastic source to go to in terms of getting a good basic understanding of growth and maturation, but also some of the practical side of it as well. And I do believe there's a new edition coming out. Is that correct, John? Oh, you're on mute.
Unmute, John.
You got too excited.
Yeah, thanks. We all know I've never been great at self-promotion, but yes, that edited text is coming out, and the strength of that text is that it's edited. It has got contribution from authors from all around the world, and I'm lucky to have two of them on the call here. But it's a real mix of experts from different disciplines with different perspectives. Across a range of it started out very physical, but in our third edition we're very sort of biophysical, social, and yes, lots of new chapters and lots of new content to look out for in the third edition.
Just to add to that as well, the Growth and Maturation and Sport and Physical Activity book by Professor Robert Molina, the third edition of that is going to be coming out relatively soon. Been very lucky to have had the opportunity to review the chapters, and some really good quality stuff added in there.
And if I may, I just want to give a shout out to Griff Parsons. He's the head of science and medicine in the academy, and he's the person that found these talented practitioners in science and medicine, brought myself, Sean, and John in, instigated this very humble person. That's why he's not here. He likes to let the people who do the work share. Fantastic practitioner, very experienced, and he embodies what the academy is trying to do. Progressive. This is very progressive. Caring, he looks after his team very well, and caring. Even I came in a flight in bad weather, and he checked in on me when I landed, and that's living those purpose of the academy. So I'm very thankful for him for inviting me into this environment.
Here, although virtually in my case. But no, thank you very much. We're 1 minute over, but I think that's pretty good, and you guys can get some lunch. But I really appreciate the invite from Gruff for me to be here, and obviously you guys, although in the same building in different rooms based on my recommendations for audio and sound quality, of course. So really appreciate it, Cassie, John, Sean, Des, Gary, and Cam, and look forward to seeing the fruits of all this labour in the coming weeks, months, and years. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob.
Cheers, Rob.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rob.